There's a certain kind of fear, the kind that doesn't come from what you see, but from what you asterisk here asterisk. Because when something is hidden, your mind fills in the blanks. And sometimes, your imagination isn't wrong. It started on a quiet afternoon. The kind of quiet that feels unnatural. The kind where even the walls seem like they're listening. I was 14 at the time. Too old to believe in monsters, but not old enough to ignore fear. That day had been completely normal. School ended. The sun was still out. Kids were laughing outside. Everything felt safe. But the moment I stepped inside my house, something felt off. Not wrong, just different. You ever walk into a place you've been 1,000 times, and suddenly it doesn't feel like yours anymore? Yeah, that. My parents weren't home. That wasn't unusual. They both worked late shifts. My older brother, Samir, was supposed to be there, but his shoes were gone. So I figured he'd already left. That meant one thing. I was alone. Now, most people would enjoy that. Freedom, silence, no rules. But me, I hated it. Because when I was alone, I always had this feeling, like someone else was. I tried to ignore it. Threw my bag on the bed, plugged in my earphones, started watching random videos. Anything to fill the silence. Because silence makes you notice things. A few minutes passed. Then I paused the video. Not because I wanted to, but because something interrupted me. A sound, a faint thud, from upstairs. I froze. My room was on the ground floor. Samir's room was upstairs, right above me. At first I smiled. Okay, he's still home. Maybe he forgot something. Maybe he came back. That made sense. Right. I took out my earphones. Waited. Expected to hear footsteps. Movement. Something normal. Nothing. Just silence. Again. That's when the feeling came back. Stronger this time. That tightness in your chest. Like your body knows something before your brain does. I stood up slowly. Walked toward the staircase. Each step felt heavier. Like something was pulling me back. Telling me, don't go. But I went anyway. Because fear has this weird effect. It makes you curious. Even when you know you shouldn't be. Halfway up the stairs, I heard it again. But this time, it wasn't just a thud. It was movement. Slow, heavy, like something being dragged across the floor. I stopped, my hand gripping the railing tighter. My heart pounding louder than the sound itself. Samir, I called out. No answer. Of course not. Because deep down, I already knew. That wasn't him. The air felt colder upstairs. Not physically, just wrong. I reached the hallway. Samir's door was slightly open. Just a crack. Dark inside. And then, I heard something. A voice. But not a clear one. Not words. Just murmuring. Low. Unnatural. Like someone trying to speak, but forgetting how. My entire body went numb. Because I knew that voice. Not the sound, but the feeling of it. It didn't belong. I stepped back slowly, trying not to make a sound, trying not to breathe too loudly. Because suddenly, I didn't want it to know I was there. The murmuring stopped. And then, silence. That silence again. But this time, it wasn't empty. It was watching. Then came the footsteps. Slow, deliberate, heavy, inside the room, moving toward the door. My brain screamed, "Run!" But my body wouldn't move. The door creaked open just a little more. And I swear, for a split second, I saw something. Not clearly, just a shape. Too tall, too still. Then, the footsteps stopped, right at the doorway, and everything went quiet again. That's when something snapped inside me. I turned and ran down the stairs, almost tripping, barely breathing. I didn't stop until I reached the bathroom, locked the door, and stood there, listening, because now the sound had followed me. Footsteps on the stairs, slow, heavy, closer. My heart was racing so loud, I was scared it could hear it. The steps reached the bottom, paused, then moved again, across the floor, toward me, each step echoing like something learning how to walk. It stopped outside the bathroom door. Right there, I held my breath, didn't move, didn't blink. Then, something touched the door. Not knocking, not pushing, just resting against it. And I could hear it, breathing, but it wasn't normal breathing. It was uneven, like it wasn't used to lungs. I covered my mouth, tears in my eyes, trying not to make a sound. Seconds felt like hours. Then suddenly, bang, something hit the door. Hard. I jumped back, almost screaming. Then again, bang, bang, not trying to break in, just testing, like it knew I was inside. Then it stopped. Silence. Again. Minutes passed, or maybe longer. I don't know. Eventually, I heard something else. The front door opening, then closing. And after that, nothing. I stayed there for a long time, too scared to move, too scared to check. When I finally stepped out, the house was empty, completely. Samir came home hours later. I told him everything, every detail. He laughed at first, thought I was messing with him, until I mentioned the voice. That's when his expression changed, because he told me something I'll never forget. He said, sometimes, late at night, he hears whispering coming from inside his closet, and he always thought it was just his imagination. But after that day, we both knew it was. And the scariest part, we never found out what was inside that room, or why. It knew exactly where I was, because some things don't need to be seen to find you. And if you think that was disturbing, the next story will make you question something even worse. What if the danger isn't inside your house, but living right next to you? There's a different kind of fear, not the kind that hides in shadows, but the kind that smiles at you every single day. Because sometimes the most terrifying people aren't strangers. They're the ones who already know your name. It began in a place that never really felt safe. A tall, aging apartment building, standing in the middle of a noisy, restless city. The kind of place where sirens never stop, where neighbors don't talk, and where everyone pretends not to notice anything. I was 16 when we moved there. Just me and my mother. We didn't have many options. Cheap rent usually comes with a cost, and we learned that very quickly. Our apartment was near the end of a long hallway on the 7th floor. Dim lights, flickering bulbs, walls stained with years of neglect. But it wasn't the building that made me uncomfortable. It was him. He lived in the last apartment at the end of the hall. And from the very first day, he noticed me. Not casually, not like a normal neighbor. No, he watched. Every time I walked down that hallway, he was there, sitting by his door, silent, still, just staring. At first, I thought it was coincidence. Maybe he liked fresh air. Maybe he didn't have much to do. I tried to ignore it. But then, it became a pattern. Morning, afternoon, night. Every time I stepped outside, he was already there. And the way he looked at me, it wasn't curiosity. It wasn't friendliness. It was recognition. Like he already knew something about me. Something I didn't. My mother noticed it too. One night, she grabbed my arm before we entered the hallway. Her voice was low. "Serious? Don't talk to that man." That was it. No explanation. No discussion. And somehow, that made it worse. Because when someone warns you like that, it means they're scared too. Days turned into weeks. Weeks into months. And the man never stopped watching. Then one day, he spoke. I was unlocking our apartment door. My back turned to him, trying to pretend he didn't exist. That's when I heard it. "Hi." I froze. It wasn't loud. It wasn't aggressive. But something about it felt wrong. Slowly, I turned around. He was still sitting there. Same position. Same expressionless face. But now, he was smiling. Just slightly. "Hi," I replied. Quietly. Big mistake. Because from that moment on, he didn't just watch anymore. He interacted. Every time I passed him, he would greet me. Ask simple questions. "How was your day? Going somewhere? You're alone today?" Normal questions. But not from him. Because his tone never changed. His face never changed. It was like he was pretending to be human. And then one day, he said something that made my stomach drop. I was walking back home from school, tired, distracted. As I stepped into the hallway, there he was, watching, waiting. I tried to ignore him, walk straight to the door. But before I could unlock it, he spoke. "Your mom isn't home tonight, is she?" I froze, slowly turned around. "How do you know that?" He didn't answer. He just nodded. That same slow, deliberate nod. And smiled. I didn't say anything else. Didn't ask anything. I just went inside. Locked the door. But my hands were shaking. Because that wasn't a guess. That wasn't random. He knew. That night, I was alone. And for the first time, being alone didn't feel quiet. It felt exposed. I tried to distract myself. Watched TV. Played music. Anything to avoid thinking. But then, I heard something. A sound. Faint. Like scratching. I muted the TV, listened carefully. There it was again. Scariest. Coming from my bedroom. My heart started racing. I grabbed my phone, walked slowly toward the room. Every step felt heavier than the last. The door was slightly open. I pushed it gently. The room looked normal. Nothing out of place. But the sound was still there. Scariest. Scariest. Coming from the wall. I stepped closer, kneeled down, and that's when I saw it. A tiny hole, barely noticeable, right in the wall, at eye level. I leaned in, slowly, carefully, and looked through it. For a second, I saw nothing, just darkness. Then, something moved, and suddenly, there was an eye, staring right back at me. I screamed, fell backward, heart pounding uncontrollably, because that wasn't imagination. Someone was watching me from the other side of the wall. And then it hit me. That wall separated our apartment from his. My hands started shaking. My breathing got heavier. I ran to the bathroom, checked the walls, and there it was. Another hole, perfectly placed, facing the shower. That's when I understood. The scratching, the sounds. He wasn't just watching. He was creating ways to watch. My stomach turned. I grabbed my phone, called my mom, trying to explain everything through panic. And while I was on the call, there was a knock on the door. Slow, heavy. My blood ran cold because I already knew who it was. Then his voice came through the door. Open up. Silence. Open the door. Louder this time. I didn't do anything wrong. My mom was yelling through the phone. Call the police now. The knocking got aggressive. Bang. Open the door. Bang. Bang. I stepped back, dialed emergency, hands shaking so badly I could barely press the screen. And then, suddenly, silence. The knocking stopped. His voice disappeared. Just like that. A few minutes later, the police arrived. The hallway was empty, but when they checked his apartment, they found tools, drills, and more holes. Not just in my wall. In multiple walls. Multiple apartments. He had been watching people for a long time. Carefully, quietly, learning their routines, their lives, their secrets. And the scariest part, no one knew how long he'd been doing it, or how much he had already seen. He was arrested that night, taken away. But even after he was gone, I couldn't sleep, because every time I closed my eyes, I felt it, that same feeling, like someone was still watching. And just when you think you've seen the worst of what humans can do, the next story will take you somewhere far from civilization, where the danger is something no one has ever been able to explain. There's a reason people fear the dark, not because of what we can't see, but because of what might be watching us from within it. Out in the wild, far from cities, far from people, you begin to realize something uncomfortable. You're not at the top of the food chain anymore. And whatever is asterisk, you don't get to see it first. This happened a few years ago. A trip that was supposed to be fun, simple, An escape from everything. 3 people. 1 car. A destination that didn't exist on any map. His name was Horace, the kind of guy who lived for adventure. Camping, hiking, survival. He loved all of it. He used to say something that always stuck with me. Real nature doesn't have boundaries. At the time, that sounded inspiring. Now, it sounds like a warning. He invited me last minute. Said it would be different. Not like regular camping. No crowds, no noise, just us in the wild. I hesitated, but I went anyway. That was my first mistake. The drive took hours. We left the main roads behind, then the smaller ones, then even the dirt paths. Eventually, it didn't feel like we were going somewhere. It felt like we were leaving everything behind. Civilization faded. Signal disappeared. Even the air felt heavier. We finally stopped in the middle of nowhere. Trees everywhere. Tall, still, silent, too silent. Horace smiled. This is perfect. Perfect. That word would haunt me later. We unpacked, set up tents, gathered wood. Everything felt normal, almost peaceful. The sun began to set, and the forest changed. Shadows stretched longer. The temperature dropped, and that silence got louder. You don't realize how much noise exists in the world until it's gone. No cars, no voices, no distant hum of life. Just nothing. We lit a fire, sat around it, talking, laughing, trying to convince ourselves this was a good idea. Time passed. One of us went to sleep, then another. Eventually, it was just me and Horace. That's when he suddenly went quiet. "Do you hear that?" he whispered. I listened. At first, nothing. Then, footsteps. Far away. Slow. Crunching against leaves. I frowned. Probably an animal. Horace didn't respond, which was strange, because he was the expert. He was supposed to reassure me, but he didn't. The footsteps continued, not approaching, not leaving, circling around us. Slowly, my chest tightened. "Is that normal?" I asked. Still no answer. Horace stood up, his face serious now. "Get inside the tent." Those words hit differently, because for the first time, he sounded scared. I didn't argue, didn't question. I got inside, zipped it shut. The fire outside flickered, casting shadows against the fabric. And then, the sound changed. The footsteps weren't alone anymore. There was something else. A noise. Clicking. Sharp. Irregular. Like bones snapping. Or teeth tapping together. I held my breath. Because that wasn't any animal I knew. It didn't sound natural. It sounded wrong. The footsteps got closer. And closer. Until they stopped. Right outside. I froze. The tent wall barely separated me from it. I could feel its presence. Heavy. Still. Then, I saw it. A shadow. Projected against the tent. Tall. Too tall. Standing on 2 legs. Not moving. Just standing there. Watching. My heart felt like it was going to explode. Because that wasn't possible. Animals don't stand like that. People don't move like that. Then, it tilted its head, slowly, as if trying to understand what it was looking at. And that's when I realized something. It wasn't just observing. It was learning. Suddenly, a scream shattered the silence. From the other tent, pure terror. I didn't think. I didn't hesitate. I burst out of my tent. The fire was dying, barely lighting the area. Harris was already running, dragging the other person with him. "Run," he yelled. That was all I needed. We ran, through the darkness, branches hitting our faces, ground uneven beneath our feet. No direction, no plan, just away. But the worst part, we weren't alone, because behind us, something was following. Heavy footsteps, faster now, matching our pace, getting closer. I didn't look back. I couldn't, because deep down, I knew if I saw it clearly, I'd never forget it. And maybe I wouldn't survive it. We kept running until we saw it. The car, a miracle in the darkness. We jumped in, slammed the doors. Harris started the engine and floored it. The tires screamed. The car jolted forward. And still, something chased us. For a few seconds, we could hear it, right behind the car. Then, nothing, just like that. Gone. We didn't stop driving. Didn't say a word. Not until we reached the main road. Safe. Or at least, we thought we were. Hours later, when everything settled, I asked the question we were all avoiding. What was that? Harris didn't answer immediately. He just stared ahead, then finally said something that still chills me to this day. I don't know. A man who knew everything about nature, animals, survival, and even he had no explanation. We left everything behind that night. Tents, gear, memories, and we never went back. But sometimes, late at night, I think about that shadow, the way it stood, the way it watched, the way it learned, and I can't help but wonder, what if it wasn't hunting us? What if it was studying us? 3 stories, 3 different places, 3 different horrors. But what if I told you there's something connecting them all? Something hidden, something subtle, that most people never notice. Fear is powerful, but confusion is worse, because fear tells you to run, but confusion keeps you standing still. After everything that happened, we tried to move on. That's what people do, right? They take something unexplainable, something terrifying, and they bury it, tell themselves it wasn't real, or that it can't happen again. But the problem with stories like these is that they don't end. They just wait. Weeks passed, then months. Life slowly returned to normal. Or at least, it pretended to. I stopped talking about the house, stopped thinking about the footsteps, the voice, that thing behind the door. But sometimes, late at night, I would still wake up, not because of a noise, but because of a feeling. That same feeling, like something was standing just outside my room, not moving, not breathing, just there, watching. I never opened the door. Not once, because deep down, I already knew. If I did, I wouldn't like what I'd see. Meanwhile, things weren't normal for her either. The girl from the apartment, even after that man was arrested, even after the walls were sealed, she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, of being exposed. She started noticing small things, objects slightly out of place, curtains moved, lights left on, tiny details, easy to ignore, but impossible to forget. Because once someone invades your privacy like that, your mind never fully recovers. You start questioning everything, every shadow, every reflection, every sound. And the worst part, you stop trusting your own reality. Because what if you missed something again? What if you're still being watched? Then there was us. The forest. We never spoke about it again. Not properly. Harris avoided the topic completely, which was strange, because he used to talk about everything. But not that night. Never that night. Until one evening, months later, he finally said something. We were sitting together, quiet, and out of nowhere, he asked me a question. Do you remember the sound it made? I nodded. That clicking noise. Sharp. Unnatural. He looked at me. Serious? I've heard that before. My stomach dropped. Where? He hesitated, then said something that changed everything. Not in the forest. Silence. Then where? He swallowed. In my house. I felt a chill run through my entire body. Because suddenly, everything connected. The sounds, the patterns, the feeling. It wasn't just happening in one place. It wasn't random. It was repeating. Different people, different locations, same presence, same behavior. Watching, waiting, learning, and then getting closer. I started thinking back to that day in my house. The footsteps, the voice, the way it moved. It wasn't aggressive at first. It didn't attack immediately. It approached slowly, like it was trying to understand something. Just like the thing in the forest. Just like the man next door. Observing, studying. But here's the part that doesn't make sense. The neighbor was human. The thing in the forest was not. And whatever was inside my house, I still don't know. So how could they all feel the same? That's the question that stayed with me. That's the question that still hasn't been answered. Until I noticed something else. Something small, but important. All of it happened when we were alone. Every single time. No witnesses. No interruptions. Just us. And it. Almost like it was choosing the moment. Choosing when to appear. Choosing when to get close. And then disappearing. Before anyone else could see. Before anyone else could believe. Which leads to a terrifying thought. What if it's still doing that? Right now. To someone else. Watching. Waiting. Learning. Because if there's one thing all these stories prove, it's that whatever this is, it's patient. And it doesn't make mistakes. You won't see it clearly. You won't understand it until it's already too late. And maybe that's the point. Maybe it doesn't want to be understood. Maybe it just wants to observe. Or maybe It's waiting for something. Something bigger. Something we're not ready to see. And in the final part, we uncover the most disturbing possibility of all. What if these weren't isolated incidents? What if they were all connected to something much larger? Something that has been watching humanity for a very long time. There's a moment, after fear fades, after the adrenaline is gone, after the silence returns, when your mind starts asking questions, not about what happened, but about why. Because the truth is, random things don't repeat. And what we experienced wasn't random. 3 different places, 3 different people, a house, an apartment, a forest, completely unrelated, completely separate, and yet the same patterns, the same behaviors, watching, listening, learning. That's not coincidence. That's intention. And intention means intelligence. That realization changes everything. Because now you're not dealing with fear. You're dealing with something that thinks, something that understands, something that chooses. And once you accept that, the next question becomes impossible to ignore. What does it want? At first, we tried to find logical explanations. Break-ins, mental stress, animals, anything that could make sense. But every explanation fell apart because none of them could explain everything. A man watching through walls. Yes, that's human. Disturbing but explainable. But the thing in the forest, the way it moved, the sounds it made, the sheer presence of it, that wasn't human. And what was inside the house? That didn't behave like anything we understood. So what happens? When logic fails, you're left with possibilities. And some of those possibilities are worse than any answer. One theory stayed with me, not because it made sense, but because it connected everything. What if it wasn't 3 separate encounters? What if it was the same thing? Not physically, not in one form, but the same asterisk presence asterisk. Adapting, changing, appearing differently, depending on where it was. Think about it. In the apartment, it used a human, someone who could blend in, watch without suspicion. In the house, it stayed hidden, using sound, voice, movement, testing reactions. And in the forest, it didn't need to hide, because out there, it was already in control. That idea is terrifying because it suggests something bigger, something that understands environments, understands behavior, understands asterisk as asterisk. And if that's true, then maybe we're not the ones observing the unknown. Maybe the unknown is observing us for a long time, longer than we think. There's another detail most people miss. None of us were harmed. Not directly. We were scared, terrified, but not attacked. Why? If something has the ability to get that close, to watch, to follow, why doesn't it act? Unless that's not its goal. What if the fear is part of the process? What if it's studying reactions, learning how we behave under pressure, learning how we think, how we respond, how we break? And once it knows enough, what happens next? That's the question that keeps me awake at night, because there's no answer. only possibilities, and every possibility is worse than the last. Sometimes, I try to convince myself it's over, that it was just a phase, a series of unfortunate, unexplainable events. But then, something small happens, something subtle, a sound, a movement, a feeling, and suddenly, I'm back there again, in that house, behind that door, hearing footsteps that don't belong. Or I'm in that apartment, looking through a hole and realizing someone is already looking back. Or I'm in that forest, running in the dark, knowing something is right behind me. And it's faster, stronger, smarter. But the worst part, it doesn't feel like a memory anymore. It feels recent, like it never really ended, like it's still happening, somewhere, right now, to someone else, maybe even to you. Because the truth is, you don't need to go looking for it. You don't need to enter a forest, or live in a broken building, or stay alone in a quiet house. If it exists, it already knows where you are. And if it's still watching, then maybe. The real question is, what is it? But why hasn't it shown itself yet? Because when it finally does, it won't be an accident. It won't be random. It will be a decision. And by then, it might already know everything about you. Your habits, your fears, your routines, your breaking point. And once something knows that much about you, you're not in control anymore. It is. So tonight, when everything goes quiet, when the lights are off, when you feel that strange sensation, like you're not alone, don't ignore it. Because sometimes, that feeling, it's not in your head. It's real. And maybe, it's been there the entire time.